Okay, we're live again now, Chair.
So, councillors, table officers, then please. Next item is Cambridge Retail Park, Newmarket Road. We have.
Sorry,
Yes.
Chair.
Yep.
Nigel Paisley. Did you want me just to say something about the Meadows and Buchan Street applications?
Oh yes, please do that first, then. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to make the situation around these next two items clear, particularly for those viewing the committee today. So, as members are aware, the Meadows proposal falls within both the City and South Cambridgeshire District Council's administrative areas. An application has been submitted to the City Council, which is the one that's on the agenda today, and another to South Cambridgeshire District Council, which is on the agenda for South Cambs Planning Committee tomorrow. So the site will fall within the jurisdiction of a new Joint Development Control Committee, which is to be formed next month. And officers consider it would be preferable if both applications were considered together at that committee rather than separately at the City and South Cambs committees. So officers therefore recommend the application is withdrawn from this agenda, and a similar recommendation is to be made at tomorrow's South Cambs Planning Committee. The following item at Buchan Street relies on any approval of the new Meadows Community Centre, so officers consider that this application would also need to be deferred until after consideration of the Meadows application, and I would therefore recommend it too is withdrawn from the agenda to be brought back to the committee at a future date. And I think, Chair, you may need to seek the authority of members for withdrawal of both these items from committee.
Have your authority, members.
Chair, I'm here. I think we need a roll call.
Yes. Okay. We'll do the roll call before the authority. Then, fair enough. So you're there, Councillor Baden. Councillor Green.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Lord.
Present.
Councillor McQueen.
Present.
Councillor Plorer.
Present.
Councillor Thornborough.
Present.
Councillor Tunnicliffe.
Present.
Thank you very much. So, what were we saying? Oh yeah, do I have your authority, committee, to withdraw those two items on that basis?
Yes.
Agree. Agree.
Can't hear anything to the contrary.
Agreed.
In that case, we'll move on to item 8, Cambridge Retail Park, Newmarket Road. Lewis Tomlinson is the officer. We have one or two speakers. I don't know, is it Matthew Danish or Roxanne DeBoo? I think it might be Matthew, is it? Not here at the moment, perhaps. Well, we can get on with that and come back to him, I guess. So I think, Lewis, if you want to introduce the item then, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just load up my presentation. Thank you, Chair. So the site is Cambridge Retail Park. Houses a number of retail stores such as Homebase, Dunelm, Sports Direct, Argos and Currys. The car park serves these shops within the retail park and is served by 3 vehicular accesses, 2 from Newmarket Road and 1 from Coldham's Lane. So you can see 2 from Newmarket Road, and then the Coldham's Lane one is just here. So this is just an aerial view of the car park, so you can just see it more clearly. So the area in discussion is this element here. So plan application reference C/02/0136/RM was granted permission in February 2002 for the erection of buildings on the site with associated infrastructure. Condition 5 of this consent stated that there would be no means of access through the site for motor vehicles other than buses between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road, and the measure shall be erected to prevent such a route for motor vehicles. So here's the condition in full. The main aim of the condition was to secure something, a measure to be erected such as a bollard. So in this case, it refers to a rising bollard within the site, preventing access for general traffic from Coldham's Lane to Newmarket Road and vice versa. The bollard has not been operational since the middle of 2018, and this application seeks to remove condition 5 from the plan permission, as mentioned before, in order to regularise the removal of the bollard. So just here I've highlighted where it is. And this is a Google Street View, so you can see the bollard is just there. And this is the traffic calm measure stopping cars going from Coldham's Lane through the site to Newmarket Road. So I just want to make members aware of the following. So the existing route is subject to a 5 mph limit and comprises of traffic calming measures in the form of a raised crossing in front of Homebase and Dunelm, along with a speed bump and further pedestrian crossings in between, with additional speed signs erected along the route. Officers do not consider this a fast cut through. It isn't a back lane or residential street, it's a private car park. Newmarket Road accesses are controlled by traffic lights, and the Coldham's Lane access is a give priority to oncoming vehicles through the form of a roundabout. So just here, and you've got traffic lights on this junction at Newmarket Roads. As it is a car park serving the retails with a number of crossings for pedestrians, most likely with trolleys, motor vehicle users should be aware of people needing to cross their cars, as well as cars turning in and out of various sections of the car park. These are all traffic calm measures in themselves in affecting the behaviour of motor vehicle users. It's been noted that bus services also no longer use this route. So the Highway Development Control and Transport Assessment Team at Cambridgeshire County Council were consulted as part of this application and are considered to be the main technical consultee for this application. This isn't a situation where the impact of the removal of the bollard is purely based upon predictions of what may happen in the future, but this is a situation where the bollard has not been operational since the middle of 2018. Therefore, the applicant has submitted a transport statement, including data of car movements for the site. Survey data showed that 6.1% of traffic using the car park were using the car park as a shortcut. This is minimal in comparison to the overall number of vehicles using the car park. The Highway Development Control and Transport Assessment Team have assessed the submitted information and concluded that the existing number of vehicles using the car park as a shortcut is minimal in comparison to overall number of vehicles using the car park. The impact of the removal of the bollard on the junctions from Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road will be minimal, and in turn will help reduce the quantity of traffic passing through the junctions on Newmarket Road. It's for these reasons that the removal of the bollard would not lead to a significant impact upon the surrounding network, and officers accept this advice as they are the main consultee for this application. So, officers are recommending approval of the application subject to the inclusion of a condition requiring monitoring of, bear with me, I'll just load up my next slide. So I've got it out here in full, but the main parts of the condition is requiring monitoring of vehicles using the site as a shortcut between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road, accidents within the site involving pedestrians or cyclists, and measures to reintroduce public transport services to the site. I'll read out the condition in full at the end. So it also includes that traffic data shall be assessed annually for 5 years, and if the situation changes, local planning authority may consider it necessary to reintroduce the bollard or to introduce alternative traffic management control. So I'll just read out this condition in full, as it may be a bit small on somebody's screen. On a date annually for 5 years from the date of this planning permission, a transport review statement shall be submitted to the local planning authority for review. The statement shall include monitoring of vehicles using the site as a shortcut between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Roads, monitoring of accidents within the site involving pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles, measures to reintroduce public transport services to the site. Following the submission of any statement, if the local planning authority consider it necessary to reintroduce the bollard or alternative traffic management control, such as ANPR, it shall give written notice of such, and the bollard or any alternative measures shall be reinstated/installed within 6 months of such notification, or alternative phasing period agreed in writing by the local planning authority. The traffic data shall include the monitoring of vehicles entering and leaving the site, produced in the same format as the submitted transport statement by TTP Consulting, September 2019. The reason: to ensure any change in circumstances is assessed against Policy 81 of the Cambridge Local Plan 2018, and to ensure that appropriate mitigation is provided if required. So where are we today with the application? So due to recent delays concerning COVID-19, the applicant has submitted an appeal for the application to the planning inspector on grounds of non-determination. This means that the planning inspector will make a decision on the application. The council needs to provide its views on the application through the submission of a statement of case. Under the council scheme of delegation, the application would have needed to be considered by members of the planning committee. Officers are therefore bringing this application to the planning committee today in order to confirm the council's view, which will form its statement of case. There was an update on the amendment sheet in relation to the recommendation. So officers request delegated authority to submit a statement of case to the planning inspector outlining the recommended position on the application. Just want to make members aware that the deadline for submitting a statement of case to the planning inspector is by the end of today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lewis. So before we go on to the debate, we have a speaker. Roxanne, are you there?
Yes, yeah.
Hello. So you get 3 minutes to speak, Roxanne, and Sarah will say when the 3 minutes is up. And if you're still just making a last point or a last sentence, just carry on to the end of that. Okay, when you're ready then, Roxanne.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Roxanne Debeau. I'm the Executive Director of CamCycle, and I'm speaking on behalf of CamCycle, but I will add that prior to lockdown, I was a very, very frequent user of this route, easily up to 10 times a week going through that car park. So for CamCycle, we strongly object to this planning application because it makes a mockery of road safety and the Cambridge local plan, especially at a time when authorities are seeking vital safety improvements for walking and cycling in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The applicants have had the gall to remove an essential safety measure, a set of bollards, without permission, and thereby open up a new rat run between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road, giving drivers an incentive to speed across a location where many people are walking and cycling to access the shops. And I will point out that the image you've just been shown of that bollard, that is not what the situation looks like at the moment. Policy ATC clearly states that developments with road access must restrict through access for general motor traffic where appropriate, give high priority to the needs of pedestrians and cyclists, including their safety, and discourage inappropriate car-based links within the network. The access road in front of the retail park shops is precisely the place where there should not be through access for general motor traffic. The applicant admits that they measured 117 motor vehicles rat running through the site over a few hours one morning in December. That's already outrageous, and no doubt the problem will get worse whenever there are tailbacks on Newmarket Road or Coldham's Lane, or when the cut through gets formalised and added to GPS navigation map databases. To make matters worse, speed surveys taken in February indicate that the majority of drivers exceed the posted speed limit by a considerable margin. And as someone who cycles through there, I have experienced that. The condition the applicant seeks to remove plainly states there shall be no means of access or egress through the site for motor vehicles other than buses between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road. And the reason is to ensure the traffic impact of the development is acceptable. The recently produced planning officer's report speculates that the withdrawal of the bus service from the site reduces the primary reason for the bollard, but quite clearly that does not match a plain reading of the condition, which is unequivocally against through traffic and only mentions buses as an aside. The original rationale for this condition has not changed. There is no basis for its removal. The report also makes an altogether unacceptable statement. The removal of the bollard in turn would help reduce the quantity of traffic passing through junctions on Newmarket Road. There is no excuse for using a private car park where there is no enforcement of the rules of the road as a relief road for Newmarket Road, and thereby putting the public safety at risk. Let us not forget that the Highway Authority
Chair, the 3 minutes is now up.
to stop rat runs and make safe space for walking, cycling and social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic. It would be absurd for the city to permit this rat run, even as the county recognises the vital need to close others. We urge you to reject this Section 73 application under Cambridge Local Plan Policy 80. We would like to see immediate works ordered leading to the installation of suitable bollards and planning enforcement officers instructed to assess costs against the applicants for their rash violation of the original planning condition. Thank you. And just to say, you haven't seen an accurate image of the site, and if you'd like that, I can pull one up and share it on my screen, because what you've been shown is not what the current situation looks like.
Thank you, Roxanne. Okay, so over to the debate. So Councillor Bailey, you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I have to reiterate that I am a member of the cycling campaign, and I think it's necessary for me to say that I am currently a little bit involved in the bridge closure on Mill Road, which is there to reduce traffic and increase pedestrian and cycling. So I have to make that clear, but I don't think that in any way will make any difference to the way I make this decision today. My first point is that this is not a public highway. So any of the rules applied by the car park aren't actually enforceable. So if they say it's 5 miles an hour, apart from probably some third-party civil litigation, the Road Traffic Act does not apply in this area. So I think that's really, really important. I also think that the pandemic has shown us, and government are leading the way, surprisingly, in trying to encourage people to use feet and bicycles and get cars off of our roads. And this is something that is going to promote that. This is a car park. It's a place where almost children should be able to run freely. Clearly not, because there will be some cars there. But what we don't want is rat running. The use of Mill Road Bridge against the law by motorists at this present moment indicates just how cars and lorries do not care about cyclists and pedestrians. And I think that this is exactly, or a very similar situation to that. I would urge the committee to think very carefully about the fact that this has been running for 2 years and so it's okay. It's not okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lord.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I must admit that when I saw this proposal to formalise the arrangement, I was really rather surprised, because the whole rationale for the change, which is based on measurements made in a scenario where the official view is that there's no formal cut through this car park, are clearly not going to be holding sway at a point where the bollard is formally removed, and word gets around that you can just use that corner as a way of cutting round to Newmarket Road. Clearly, when the original planning permission was given, the intention was to restrict vehicles from making that manoeuvre. We really shouldn't be encouraging vehicles to cut through a car park. I take all the observations made about speed limits being unenforceable because it's private land. I think we're just leaving ourselves wide open to having a nasty little rat run, which will endanger other users of the car parking space and the shops associated with it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thornborough.
I think the comment about the fact that the officer was saying, I think it was 6% of cars using the space entering the car were actually cutting through. But I think the point raised by CamCycle that it's not evenly distributed over the course of the day, which might just be 1 or 2 every half an hour, but is actually more to do with when it's rush hour or there's traffic. So you get a lot of cars at certain points of the day, so that it becomes a dangerous issue. But I would like to take up the offer of CamCycle to see what it actually looks like now, if that's okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. So hold on, Roxanne. We'll go to the officer first. You shouldn't be involved in a debate at the moment, unless absolutely necessary. So, was there anything else you wanted to say, Councillor Thornborough? I think not. Okay, Councillor Poorer.
Thank you very much. I think I echo the concerns raised by my colleagues. I mean, 6% is still 1 in 16 cars that's cutting through, give or take. My concern as well is this feels like we're on the back foot here. This is something that was removed 2 years ago without permission. So they've been in breach of their planning commission for permission for 2 years. So they failed to comply. And they're now apparently pushing us for non-determination as there's been some delays due to COVID. And again, doesn't really sit very nicely with an organisation I would hope as a responsible landowner, they're trying to work with the council. Again, I pick up the point I think one of my colleagues raised about you can't say that nobody's using it as a cut through, but also if we let it go through like this, it's going to reduce the number of cars using Newmarket Road. It's either one or the other. And certainly looking at the condition that I think Lewis proposed, were this to go through, 5 years is way too long for that condition. Because what if we want to put buses through there next year? So what I did when looking at this application is obviously I went to the condition, so condition 18, which is asking to be lifted. If that condition had said, this condition is in place with the bollard to allow public transport buses to go through, and the public transport has now been removed, I would be more sympathetic, but actually the condition doesn't state that. The condition states that the reason is to ensure the traffic impact of the development is acceptable. And my feeling is that hasn't changed. So I'm struggling to see why we should allow this bollard to be removed. Because as we know in Cambridge, traffic is not lessening. It's getting worse and pollution is getting worse. So those are my main concerns. I think that's covered everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tunnicliffe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I have to say I'm not entirely in agreement with colleagues here. I spent 15 minutes standing by the zebra crossing at the entrance to this retail park on quite a busy time of day. There were also quite a number of bicycles which passed through completely at ease and without any looking over their shoulder. The first hump slowed down considerably the sort of car which you might in normal times expect to be going quite fast. And I thought, on the whole, with the comings and goings of people, don't forget these shops stay open. I think Lidl probably stays open till 8 o'clock, if not later. So there are people coming in and out, and drivers going through in order to avoid going to the junction of Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road. Aren't going to get through any quicker, and in fact probably slower because of the movement of cars that have come to buy things from the various shops. So my feeling is, you know, even if we say the bollard has to stay, it's not going to be used, is it? It hasn't been used since 2018, so I'm not sure that you know, there's much point in getting upset about this. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, my understanding would be that a permanent bollard would be erected if we so decided. Councillor Green, you want to speak?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, thank you. I tend to agree that we should be insisting on the reinstatement of this bollard. I'll tell you why. There's a few reasons. I took part in the planning committee meeting when the Lidl was approved, and it was mentioned at that committee meeting, and it was given as one of the reasons why we should allow permission for Lidl there because there was a bollard and it would ensure that there wasn't going to be any rat running on that car park, so we didn't need to worry. And I think where planning applications have rested on things like bollards and so on, we should be making sure that they're in place and enforced. I'd be quite interested to know why it hasn't been enforced over the last year and a half. And I think, us as a committee do need to look closely when we have these briefings from our enforcement officers. I mean, we're constantly asking about things like Airbnb to the point of boredom, but do we ever ask about things like bollards? Let's be a bit more proactive as a committee and ask our enforcement officers where we pick up on an issue that's important to the community to make sure that those do get enforced. I don't agree with the report. I think it's a bit wishful thinking on behalf of the officer to say in his summary on page 173 that the proposed removal of the bollard would not have any significant impact on the surrounding highway network. I think the evidence is to the contrary, and regardless of what the county highways might be saying, my experience of working in the planning system is that county officials tend to give a low priority to private car parks because they say they're excluded from the highway network. And I think we need to have a close examination of the facts around this. Everybody seems to be saying it would have an impact, so there's clearly some discrepancy there. I can myself see what the impact would be quite easily. That according to policy 80 that Roxanne quite rightly referred, priority should be given to pedestrians and cyclists above car users. And if cyclists are using this route and they come into conflict with buses, with private cars taking a rat run, then policy 80 hasn't been adhered to. And I'm very sorry that we are going to have to defend this at appeal, and it is an extra work, extra position on our hard working and very stretched planning officers. But any support we can give as a committee, I'd like to give, and I think we should send a message that bollard stays, and if they want to remove it, they give us much more sound reasons about why it needs to be removed. My view is we need to retain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I have to, before we go on, so Roxanne, you've put something in the chat. So if you think about it, you're not supposed to engage in a debate when we're debating. So in a sense, putting something in the chat is engaging in the debate. So you shouldn't have done that. I think that's my interpretation of the way it works anyway. So, and it might be best, councillors, if you don't look at the image that's been posted because it's not been approved by officers yet. We may come to it in a minute, Roxanne, but I'd like to go to the officer first to see if the officer can give us some clarification on that. So, where are we to? Councillor Lord, you haven't spoken yet, have you? So, Councillor Lord, you're next, I think.
Right, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that we shouldn't be paying attention to what's going on in the chat, apart from obviously committee members' attempts to clarify, intervene, and so on. I've not been looking at the chat myself, but I do have an additional computer right in front of me here, and I tend to go onto Street View and have a look at the places to get maybe a more of a look around than we're presented with by officers. So on Street View, it's quite clear that the current situation is that there is no bollard where there once was a pop-up bollard that allowed buses in and out of the site on that corner. So the application, whilst it may well be for removal of the bollard, is actually retrospective because it's a fait accompli at the moment. And perhaps other councillors aren't aware of this fact. So it's a retrospective. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask a couple of questions as well before we go back to the officer, and then maybe more questions, who knows. So can I just clarify with you, Lewis, has the applicant failed to comply? I'm not quite clear whether the rising bollard to stop buses, sorry, to allow buses but to stop cars, was what was supposed to be happening, hence when there were no buses it didn't apply, or whether there should have been a bollard anyway. Secondly, Lewis, do you consider this to be a cycleway or a car park? And also, Lewis, re the speaker's point, can you say what it looks like at the moment? And finally, it's not been in operation since 2018. Have there been any issues that you're aware of in that period till 2020, Lewis? So I'll go back to you now then, Lewis, and then we'll have any questions further after that.
Thank you, Chair. So in regards to how this application has come about, so the bollard was unoperational since the middle of 2018. This application is a product of our enforcement officers in discussion with the applicant about the bollard not being up. So you are correct, the bollard isn't there at the moment, and what this application is seeking to do is to remove the condition which requires the bollard to be there. So if they didn't put this application in, it would be an enforcement issue of ensuring that the bollard was reinstalled. The applicant pulled together information in the form of a transport statement, which was their kind of support and evidence for this application to remove the condition which requires the bollard to be there. The site is a private car park. There is cycle lanes through the car park for cyclists. There are crosses, but the main function of it is a private car park, not a cycle route between Coldens Lane and Newmarket Road. That is, I guess, an extra function of the car park to allow that route to take place. Sorry, Councillor Smart, what was your last question? Was it the same as the first one about complying with the condition?
I asked, had there been any issues in the 2 years that the bollard's been down?
Thank you, sorry about that. I did have a chat with David Allett from Cambridgeshire County Council. He's one of the main officers in the transport assessment team. He said he was unaware of any, but again, it is a private car park. It's not a public highway. But nothing's been made clear to me about whether there has been any accidents. I just want to touch base on the condition that we recommended. So the condition we recommended, I know there was a bit of discussion about the 5 years is too long. I'll just pull it up so you can see the wording again, just bear with me. So the condition reads, on a date annually for 5 years from the date of this plan permission, a transport review statement shall be submitted to local plan authority for review. This means that every year for 5 years, they need to provide that information. So we have the up-to-date information about the monitoring of vehicles using the site as a shortcut between Coldens Lane and Newmarket Road, the monitoring of accidents within the site involving pedestrians/cyclists and vehicles, and any updated measures to reintroduce public transport services to the site. So I just wanted to clarify that element. In regards to an updated image, I haven't been able to visit the site recently, so I relied on the Google Street View. So if Roxanne does have an updated image, I would welcome members to see that. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Smart, you're muted still.
Can't hear you, Chair.
You're muted, Chair.
Sorry, I was trying to do two things at the same time. Roxanne, hi. So if you could share the image, share your screen of the site as it looks at the moment, that would be useful then, please, Roxanne.
Bear with me one moment, I'll just bring that up.
Yeah, right, no worries, take your time.
Apologies, I haven't shared a screen on Teams before and I have a few hoops to jump through.
Okay.
Can I just make a suggestion, please, Chair? if people
Yeah,
just click on the link.
Yeah, should we do that then, Roxanne? Does that do it, does it?
Yeah, I will say I have a better image of both sides that shows it a bit more clearly where the speed bumps are in relation to the crossing, etc. But that link will get you started.
You get your best image up, and we can wait a minute. It's all right.
Yeah.
I'm happy to click on the link and share it via my screen, if members would prefer that.
And while Roxanne sees if she can get her other one up, please. Thanks, Lewis.
Bear with me.
I would have to quit Teams to enable sharing. So what I can do is email these images to someone. That might be the best approach.
Got to put your email in the thing then, Lewis, in the box. I said box, Lewis. What I meant was meeting chat, of course. Okay, there's Lewis's email then, Roxanne. So Lewis, if you want to get on and share that link whilst Roxanne is sorting out her other thing with you.
So this is the link that Roxanne shared in the chat. Shows a more updated image of where the bollard used to be.
So just to be clear then, the rising bollard is no longer visible, nor is any of the other bollards that were to left and right of the sort of the throughway.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Lewis. All right, you can put that away now. And thanks, Lewis. And if Roxanne gets the other image to you, we can have a look at that as well, perhaps. So, is there any other debate, councillors? Well, oh yes, I see Councillor Thornborough. Yeah. So you speak then, Councillor Thornborough, while Roxanne is doing that.
I'm just thinking back to the original application where this was approved with access for public transport via a bollard, and I feel that actually this description for this application should be questioned, because to me it seems that the intention of in the original scheme was that there would be no connection between Newmarket Road and Coldham's Lane, and that when there was the issue about public transport onto this site, to only accommodate the public transport, there was a connection through with a bollard. And this should not be a question. Now we should not be questioning whether the bollard goes or not. The question is whether there should be a vehicular connection between Newmarket Road and Coldham's Lane. That is the question. You know, basically, if the original scheme had not had the proposal for public transport, there would not be a connection, and we wouldn't even be talking about a bollard coming out or not, unless there was a secondary requirement for emergency vehicles. So,
thanks for that, Councillor. So, Lewis, have you got that image up that Roxanne sent you then now? Can you show us the
I have. I've got two images, so I'll
Okay,
show you one and the other. So
we'll
bear
go
with.
after that.
So here's the first image, and you've got home base on your left-hand side.
Right, okay, thank you.
And let me just swap images, bear with me. And this is the photo facing the other way with home base on your right hand side. So that would have Coldham's Lane behind you.
Okay, thanks, Lewis. Just before we go on with debate, I note that the rising bollard sign with the exclamation mark is there. That's a highway sign, isn't it? So, or is it that the car park owners have erected that at their own cost? Do you know, Lewis?
I don't know. I assume it is erected by the applicant because it's on private land. It's not on the public highway, but that's an assumption.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, let's go on with debate then. That's very useful. Thank you very much for sharing that, Roxanne, with us. So, Councillor Green, you're next. You're muted, Councillor Green, still.
Sorry. Yeah, just following on from Councillor Thornborough's comments about the rationale for the appeal from the applicant. Thinking about it a bit more, I do think as well, even the applicant is being a little bit hasty really in attempting to get this bollard condition removed, because thinking about the whole issue around private land and public land and the use of it as a through route, if private cars continue to use that through route, which is private land, as a cut through, then that could establish a right of way, and the applicant would then be obliged to allow traffic through, private traffic. It hasn't been designed for that purpose. You might even end up in a situation where it has to be adopted as highway, public highway, at the public expense, because it becomes used as public highway and rights are attained. But first and foremost, I think what we have to consider is that it was never designed for private transport as a cut through. It was only designed as a car park, and the users of that car park, their safety would become at risk. It probably already is at risk, heightened risk of using that car park because of the increased use in private transport. So, you know, when they design these private car parks, the turning areas, the spaces for the cars, the width of the road, they don't adhere to highway standards. They can design it how they like, as long as it meets their own purposes as a car park. And if it were to be scrutinised by the highway department, it would probably fail the tests of the highway standards, like for things like signage and width and turning areas. So it's clearly private. It clearly doesn't meet highway standards. It clearly shouldn't be allowed to turn into a public route, because if it does, the users of that car park will be at enhanced risk. And I think the applicant needs to think again about the consequences for them as landowner if they allow this cut through and continue to allow this cut through.
Thank you, Councillor. I may need to call on your advice at some stage, I think, Keith, legal officer. There's lots of things are being said about public and private, and I'm not quite sure about all of those things myself. But perhaps I could ask a couple of questions there, then, as there's a bit of a break in debate with councillors in the chat. So firstly, can the officer confirm that the condition to disallow access through the site is a reasonable condition? I mean, I've come across many car parks which have more than one entry more than one entry point or exit point, whichever you want to call it, from different roads, which you could effectively drive through. So is that a reasonable condition? Or was it a reasonable condition? It may have been accepted by the applicant at the stage when it was applied, because it seemed appropriate with the bus route going through, which now isn't the case. And the other thing was the 6% roughly that was said to be the traffic that went through the site, that was talked about as being a rat run or a through route. So is all of that percentage to do with traffic that wants to use it as a cut through, or does that 6% include users that have gone to the site, parked, and then left at another exit because they want to go to in a different direction? That's my points. Thanks, Lewis. So, Councillor Bagent, you want to ask something now, please?
Chair, sorry. I was just getting concerned. What really are we considering here? I heard that something had got to be submitted to the inspector by today or this evening. So I would like to know, are we in a position where we should be making a very strong recommendation to an inspector, or are we in a position of adjudicating on whether this is allowed or not? And I'd have a supplementary to this.
Right, fair question. So at that point, I think we'll go back to you then, Lewis, then please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just answer Councillor Bajent's question first, because I think that's quite important. So the situation is that as the applicant has appealed to the inspector on grounds of non-determination, then the power to make a decision is taken away from the council. So as part of the process, we need to submit a statement of case outlining the council's position on the application. So the aims of today is to establish what the council's view on the application is. So officers have prepared a report with a recommendation of what we feel the recommendation is, and taking into account Cambridgeshire County Council's comments. But it's up to members to discuss this and to put forward their views, which then I will capture in a statement of case and submit to the planning inspectorate for their consideration. So, but the aim is that the condition was restrictive of having a through route through the site between Coldens Lane and Newmarket Road, and the form of control was the introduction of a rising bollard subject to allowing buses through. So what this application was seeking to do is remove the condition requiring it to have a bollard there. So in theory, yes, by removing this condition introduces a through route for traffic from Coldens Lane to Newmarket Road, because there won't be any features or measures to stop cars travelling. I hope that's clear, but I'm happy to go back over that if Councillor Bajent has more questions. Just going on to Councillor Smart's questions. So the whether the condition was reasonable. I wasn't a case officer for this original application, but my understanding is that when the condition was applied, it was to do with buses using the site as a route. The situation has now changed where buses aren't using the site. So the question is whether that condition is still required. And that's, I guess, that's the whole nature of this application, is whether a bollard is still required on the site to prevent access from Newmarket Road to Coldens Lane and vice versa. So that's a question for members to consider as part of this application. In regards to 6%, my understanding is that 6% relates to traffic purely using the site as a cut through from Coldens Lane to Newmarket Road or vice versa. That doesn't include any cars making a stop to do shopping or parking. It's purely they're using the route as a cut through. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Lewis. If anyone hasn't had their question answered, please say in the chat ideally. And I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up before we get to any other questions. So, Lewis, so just to be clear then, from middle of 2018 onwards, we were in a position where we could have enforced this bollard. We could have said you must put the bollard back in, but subsequently we've, I guess, talked to the applicant, and they have now put an application in, and they now are telling us that we need to make a decision, and it's already gone to outside of the council for that decision. So I presume there's no way of going back to the original enforcement situation where we can enforce this bollard. Then now the application is in. Perhaps you better just answer that complicated question, and we'll move on from there if you would, please, Lewis.
Sure. So with most enforcement issues, there's an assessment that takes place whether it's expedient to enforce against such a condition, in this case not being carried out. Part of that process is looking to whether it can be regularised through an application, which then forms a new assessment. So in this case, the enforcement officers approached the applicant. The applicant said they had enough information to support the removal of a bollard. So a Section 73 application was invited in, which allowed assessment through this application at Members Day. Regrettably, due to COVID-19 delays with setting up virtual committees, we couldn't get dates sorted quick enough, and there was various challenges we had to overcome with that. The applicant decided to appeal for non-determination because we could not give them a time frame for determining the application. So that's kind of where we are here. When we submit our statement of case to the inspector, and the inspector makes a decision either to allow the appeal or dismiss the appeal, if the appeal is dismissed, then it would come back to us as a local planning authority, and it would be within our power to enforce and to seek that bollard to be reinstated. I think that answers everything. Just let me know if I've missed anything, Councillor Smart.
Thanks. A couple more councillors to speak still. So, Councillor Porrer.
Thank you. I think Councillor Thornborough kind of hit it really on the head, which is this is about whether we want traffic to go through or not. So I have extra concerns. The new photos we've seen, you know, this isn't an applicant leaving it in place waiting for a decision. It's been removed. And in fact, their argument that cycle lanes have been improved, which I found a good thing in the original report, you can see from the new photos, if you compare it to the ones in the officer presentation, the striped bollards on either side that protected cycles from anything have been removed. So it's actually much less safe now, and also suggests that the applicant's kind of decided what they're going to do and is not waiting for us to enforce it. In my view, putting aside all of that, the reason that the condition was put in place originally was to ensure the traffic impact of the development is acceptable. Obviously, we can speculate now whether that was about the buses or not. They are mentioned in the text, but my view is nothing the applicant has provided has shown me that the traffic conditions have changed. In fact, what they put in is to say now 1 in 16 cars is now using that as a cut through already, which suggests to me that the original condition was reasonable and therefore should be enforced on those grounds. And finally, I just wanted to check on a technicality. Are we then voting on this so that the planning officer, sorry, the inspector understands our views, or is this kind of a summary thing that goes back to chair and spoke? So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Before we go on then, Lewis, can you just answer that last question, please, now?
Sure. So without preempting what members' views will be, if members decide to go against the officer recommendation, then we will look at the discussion that we've had here and form a reason for refusal, which will be agreed by members. Then I will go away and create a statement of case with the reason for refusal and some additional information, with the committee report as an appendix and other relevant documents. This would then be submitted to the planning inspector. I can ensure that that statement of case is provided to all members when we submit it later on. So today, the aim of today's discussion on this item is to form a view to put into that statement of case. So you will be voting on the recommendation officers have put forward, which is approval with the recommended condition, but the final say is to give delegated authority to officers to form that statement of case to submit to PINs.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, so carrying on then, Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank Lewis for covering everything there. I've been so undecided about this, and so I've been quite quiet up to now. So I use that a lot myself. I do have a son with special needs, so it's ideal for me, and we've not touched on that. It's ideal for me to go from one side of the shopping centre to the other, but I understand that, you know, at peak times that's going to be so much different. What a good weighted argument, you know, this is private land. Is this something that we should be considering? And then in a nutshell, my view at the end of it is simply it was put there in the first place to reduce those measures. It was only allowed to come down when public transport was going through. So in my view, I think we should go back to that. There's not enough weighted evidence to say, you know, that it wouldn't cause an issue. And on balance, again, I looked at this logically, and I'm looking at the whole area as well. You know, would it be worth somebody to use it as a rat run at peak time when they wanted to go from Newmarket Road to Coldham's Lane? Would it make much difference at that time of day? Again, I had to put it on balance. But then again, I've come back down. It was there in the first place to reduce that, and for a safety reason. I don't like what the county are doing here either. It doesn't sit right with me. So because of all of that, not because I don't like the county, but because it was there in the first place, I think you know I understand why the officers have gone for an approval, but on this occasion, I don't think I'll be able to agree with the officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bagent, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. This is a perennial debate that will grow and grow and grow. When it was first approved that we should put a barrier in there, traffic was less in Cambridge and we were less inclined to restrict traffic in Cambridge, or less able to, if you like. Now, we have a government and a city that are working towards a greener environment. The car is not king any longer. So I'm suggesting that we should be promoting active travel and not making it more difficult. When places become difficult to walk along or cycle along, people get back in their cars. This shouldn't be happening here or anywhere in this city. So I think we should go back to where we were. Our position is this: what right do these landowners think they have to change a decision by the council ad lib 2 years ago? What right do they think they have to do that? I say no more. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor. I see Toby wants to speak. I'm just going to say something there as well myself. I mean, I would, playing devil's advocate, Councillor Bagent, I mean, what right do we to tell landowners what to do on their land?
They applied for our planning permission, Chair, and we turned it down. We said no, we want a bollard.
Through the chair. So I am concerned, and I know I have had a response to this, but I am concerned that it's not a reasonable condition for us to tell a landowner to erect a bollard to stop a through route through their land in the way that it's being proposed today. And it seems to me, since people have expressed subjective views, that it wouldn't so much be a rat run as a rat walk, because if it's got lots of traffic coming out of the car park, you're going to have to queue to get out of it anyway. Again, I go back to my point. I've come across lots of car parks with more than one entry. I can't quite see how we can say that more than one entry, leaving through one, going in one and going out of another, should be something that we should be able to make a decision on. And also that it's complicated, isn't it? I'm not quite sure of my opinion, to be honest, but I'm just concerned that we make the right decision, and maybe Keith or Nigel might have something to say on that. Anyway, you speak, and I'm whispering on a bit, aren't I? Actually, Toby, it's your turn to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the issues that members are raising are legitimate issues that officers could incorporate into a statement of case. Because of the timing involved, Chair, if members do decide not to run with the recommendation in the officer report, then as a backup, Lewis has already drafted a kind of theoretical reason for refusal that we could use as a basis for a statement of case. So just conscious of the time, Chair, and where I think the direction of travel is going in terms of members' feedback to this application. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Toby. So I've got Katie and Lewis. So can I have Lewis speak before you, Katie? Let's see what Lewis wishes to say at the moment. Lewis?
I just wanted to touch upon whether the condition is reasonable. I think in relation to highway safety and movements between the site, because Newmarket Road and Coldham's Lane are quite busy roads, we do have the authority to assess the impact upon the highway, because you've got potential conflict of users, and with all the discussion that we've had today raises various issues in itself with a cut through between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road. It comes down to whether that condition is still considered to be necessary for the site. So it's whether that condition is necessary, whether bollard is necessary to prevent a free route between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road. Like Toby mentioned, I've pulled together a reason. After listening to the discussion, I've pulled together a reason, but I'll wait until the appropriate time to share that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Lewis. And just to be clear, I mean, in a sense, it doesn't need to be a bollard, does it? It could be any number of things that stop the traffic. That's the point here. It could be a sort of green area or something with sort of a raised planter or something. That's the point that we're considering, because in fact, of course, if it was to do with buses, we wouldn't have a bollard. We would have automatic number plate recognition, I guess, because that's what happens these days. So let's go back to the debate. So, Councillor Thornborough, you're next.
I think that we have policies which say we know we've got this triangle of transportation where we prioritise walking, cycling and public transport. And I think that it's a real shame that the public transport to the site has been taken away, and it's probably through the decision of the bus company rather than the site owners. And I think we should try and encourage, we should allow the opportunity for the buses to return, and therefore we would go back to our triangle of transportation. But without the buses, I feel that we must prioritise the cycling and walking, and I think there are various policies which we could support a refusal on for those grounds.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lord.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Really, I found myself with this case thinking of my own sort of interaction with Newmarket Road, Coldham's Lane over the years. There's been talk about having multiple accesses to this car park, and how, you know, under other circumstances, people tend to use them interchangeably freely without any issues. But in the case of many times I've driven down Newmarket Road, particularly at peak times, the situation even going between one entrance to the retail park and the other retail park, I found myself thinking, crikey, I could just turn left here, drive round the car park and come out 100 yards further down the road, and I'd save myself time. It can be that bad on Newmarket Road that you find yourself thinking, just for the sake of gaining 100 yards, I'd drive through the car park. Now, actually, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I hadn't realised myself that the bollard and the bus restrictions had been removed from the other corner of that car park. And believe you me, I will certainly be using that as a cut through now I know it's there. So there's one member of the public's reaction to the fact that he now knows that he can use that car park to cut off the corner, which is a heavily congested section of Newmarket Road. I know where I stand on it. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that then, Councillor. When you say you know where you stand, I presume you're against the officer recommendation in that sense then?
I actually know where I stand, in as much as if that corner is left unrestricted, I'll be using it as a rat run.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I just want to focus on the debate on this item really, rather than your personal driving circumstances. So in that case, if I ask a question actually, Lewis, going forward, I presume that the adjourned decision protocol isn't applicable today because we need a decision today, don't we, Lewis?
That's correct. So it's not the normal process for dealing with a major application. When we received notification of the appeal and the deadline for the statement of case, we did seek an extension from the planning inspectorate. They did not grant it, so we must submit our statement of case by the end of today if we wish to put forward the council's view on the application. So a decision or a view needs to be formed today about what we put forward in the statement of case.
Okay, and from what I've heard so far, it seems that a lot of the committee are feeling quite concerned about the recommendation to approve. So would it be best then, Lewis, to go to your alternative version of events where you give us the reasons for refusal, basically, or should we sort of just adjourn for 10 minutes or something to do that?
Chair, I think a brief adjournment would be a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, so councillors, we'll do that then. So it's 12:20, come back at 12:30, and then we'll go from there. That's all right. Thank you. Gonna have to do a roll call, I suppose, aren't I?
Chair, you might just need to wait just a minute before Tom confirms that we're live again.
Oh yeah, okay. So Tom, if you want to confirm when we're live then, please.
Yeah, we're live.
Okay, welcome back, councillors. Apologise for taking a bit longer than I said then. So I just need to confirm you're all here, councillors, as usual. So Councillor Bajent.
I am here, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Green.
I'm here.
Councillor Lord.
Present.
Councillor McQueen.
Here.
Councillor Porrer.
Present.
Councillor Thornborough.
Present.
Councillor Tunnicliffe.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, councillors. So I think Nigel, did you say you wanted to say something at this stage before we go on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There were a couple of things I wanted to say. Firstly, during the debate, some members referred to the fact that the applicant should not have done this. They should not have removed this bollard, that they're in breach of condition, and obviously expressed displeasure about that. Just to remind members that you need to consider the planning merits of this application. We're not here to punish the applicants for the fact that they've done something that is contrary to a condition. It is the planning merits you're looking at. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is just to confirm that when you vote, obviously this committee, as you've heard, does not have the power to make this decision. So the vote is essentially what you would have decided had you had the power to make that decision, but that will be sent to the inspectorate, who now will make the decision. So it's the council's view, effectively, that will be put to the inspector that you're voting on. If you are minded to go against the officer's recommendation to refuse, and if that is on highway safety grounds, I would just advise that we don't have any evidence of that highway safety concern. So I recognise that it's come up in the debate, but I would just warn that we don't have any evidence to present to the inspector to back up any concerns about highway safety. So I'd probably leave it at that, Chair. Thank you.
Can't see any debate at the moment in terms of that. I mean, I don't really want debate, to be honest, but any points of interest, I suppose, before we move on with the decision. But just to be clear on that, Nigel, I mean, safety is one thing, but I suppose the other way of looking at it is we do have this approach now to travel where we prioritise walking and cycling. I believe the order is walking and cycling, then public transport, then cars, in that order, something like that. So we perfectly be within our policy to be prioritising that, and if cars do go through the site, I guess they compromise walking and cycling. Is that not correct, Nigel?
Yes, I think that's a valid point, Chair. I'll just make the point that we don't have the evidence on safety. So if it was a concern, then we haven't got the evidence to present to the inspector.
Councillor Tunnicliffe.
I would just say we're talking about a retail park. A retail park, by definition, has a lot of cars. I mean, I think there's a lot of illogicality going on here. End of story.
Fair point, councillor. Okay, well in that case then I think we need to go to the vote on the officer recommendation, and we'll see what happens there, and then we can go from there. So before we do that, I'm going to have to ask the whatever you're called, Nigel, planning delivery manager, to sum up the recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it might be helpful if Lewis puts his slide back up on the screen, because that is effectively our recommendation. So, Lewis, do you want to just go through that very briefly again, just for clarity, please?
Thanks, Nigel.
Sure. So officers are recommending approval subject to the following condition. Do you want me to read out the whole condition, or are you happy just?
I think in the circumstances today, I think it might be good to read it out, please, Lewis.
Sure. So officers recommending approval subject to the inclusion of a condition. On a date annually for 5 years from the date of this planning permission, a transport review statement shall be submitted to the local planning authority for review. The statement shall include monitoring of vehicles using the site as a shortcut between Coldhams Lane and Newmarket Road, monitoring of accidents within the site involving pedestrians/cyclists and vehicles, measures to reintroduce public transport services to the site. Following submission of any statement, if the local planning authority consider it necessary to reintroduce the bollard or alternative traffic management control, such as ANPR, it shall give written notice of such, and the bollard or any alternative measures shall be reinstated/installed within 6 months of such notification or alternative phasing period agreed in writing by the local planning authority. The traffic data shall include the monitoring of vehicles entering and leaving the site, producing the same format as the submitted transport statement by TTP Consulting September 2019. Reason: to ensure any change in circumstances is assessed against policy 81 of the Cambridge Local Plan 2018, and to ensure that appropriate mitigation is provided if required. So the recommendation is officers request delegated authority submit a statement of case to the planning inspector outlining the recommended position I've just outlined on the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Did you want to add anything to that, Nigel?
No, thank you, Chair. That's the recommendation.
In that case, councillors, we'll go to the vote on the officer's recommendation. So we'll go through alphabetically as normal. So Councillor Bagent?
Refuse, Chair.
Right. Councillor Green?
I'm against the recommendation.
Councillor Lord?
I am against the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor McQueen?
Against.
Councillor Pora?
Against, Chair.
Councillor Thornborough?
Against.
Councillor Tunnicliffe?
In favour.
And I'm in favour. Can you sum those votes up then, please, Sarah?
Sorry, Chair, I made that 2 votes in favour to 6 against.
That's correct, yes. Thank
Therefore,
you, Sarah.
the recommendation falls.
In that case, Lewis, do you have something now that you can share with us in terms of summing up our approach to this item and what we might say to the inspectorate?
Sure. So after listening to the discussion, officers have pulled together a potential reason for refusal. So I'll just read it out. So the removal of the bollard encourages rat running through the site between Coldhams Lane and Newmarket Road. This will introduce increased conflict between pedestrian and cycle users of the car park and motor vehicles using the route as a rat run, which will potentially compromise highway safety, endangering pedestrians and cyclists, increasing vehicular speeds within the car park and failing to promote sustainable transport modes. The proposal therefore conflicts with policies 80 and 81 of the Cambridge Local Plan 2018.
Thank you for that, Lewis. I think perhaps take that off the screen for the minute, perhaps, or I don't know if we need to keep it, but councillors, do you want to say anything about those words, form of words? Councillor Thornborough.
I think those words are appropriate. I also wonder whether we could refer, I think it contravenes policy 56, which is about creating good spaces. Creating successful spaces. A, B and C are to do with integrating routes and creating streets while to do with traffic, and also NPPF paragraph 104C. I didn't know whether they'd consider adding those points. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bagent.
Chair, I'd like to make a mention towards active travel and the way that travel is now being organised, and most importantly that we haven't discussed actually is that the through route cuts between the car park and the shop. It's not like the through route goes round the car park, it actually cuts straight through the through route. So therefore everybody has to cross the road. And that is particularly significant in this circumstance, particularly significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pora.
I just appreciate advice. For me, one of the reasons was looking at the original condition. It did clearly say it was about the traffic impact of the development. Whilst I appreciate, obviously it's not about, we haven't got highways evidence, but for me, there's no evidence from the owners that the traffic impact has reduced since the original planning condition was imposed. And in fact, their evidence seems to suggest that it's increased because there are now more people going across it. So for me, that I wonder if we could include that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Green.
Thank you. Lewis was talking about highway safety and the conflicts between the different modes. I don't know if he referred specifically to policy 80, but I think that should be included. It's the policy in our up-to-date local plan supporting sustainable access to development. Development will be supported where it demonstrates the prioritisation of accesses by walking, cycling and public transport and is accessible for all. Ensuring major developments on the edge of cities, supporting public transport, walking and cycling to and from and within a development. Quite a thorough and quite a detailed policy, and I think it's particularly relevant in terms of making sure that pedestrians and cyclists on the site using that car park are protected.
Thanks for that, Councillor. I'll just add, Lewis, to that. Councillor Tunnicliffe, if you want to speak first, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I just come back to the point I made before. You know, we're talking about a retail park where all these other, you know, you've got to look at the context, and it seems to me a lot of the comments we're getting and completely forgetting the context.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. So can I just say something first, Councillor Green, and come back to you? So in the form of words you've put to us so far, Lewis, we talk about highway safety. I think it was compromised potentially. Now, first of all, it's not a highway, and as has been said, we don't have any evidence that there's any threat to safety. So I'm not too sure about that form of words, unless we soften it by saying may compromise highway safety, but I'm still unsure. And I think we should focus more on the policy that encourages the use of the public realm to encourage walking and cycling in this case, and not public transport, because there isn't any public transport on site, rather than talking about the highways or safety. Who else was it wanted to speak? I forget now. Councillor Green, yeah.
Yeah, I think we are able to make an assessment of safety ourselves, even though we're not highways experts. And I think our assessment is that it would not be safe. And I gave information about why, because the car park is a privately designed area with not such good spatial arrangements as a publicly designed area, the widths and the turning areas and so on. So you might find typically in a retail car park such as this that you don't have footpaths linking the car park to the retail unit. So people have to walk on the road, or what is the road. You know, it's not a road officially, but they walk along the car park where the cars go. No footpath linkages, and that's because there's no standards applied to private car parking spaces like there are private car parks like there are to public. And I think just to come back on Councillor Tunnicliffe's point about, yeah, this is a retail park and we do expect cars to use this area, but I don't know of any retail parks where there's a through route going through it. They're usually end destinations. The cars go there, they park, customers go in the shop, come out, put their shopping in the car and then drive back out the same way. And by introducing a through route,
let's focus on where we are at the moment. We're past debate at the moment now, and we're talking about the form of words.
I get that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So just on that, I don't know if Keith wants to say anything about what Councillor Green just said then, in terms of us not needing evidence to defend any comment on safety, or perhaps Nigel. Whilst one of those two thinks about it, I mean, I think what I'm guessing at is if at appeal we say our reason is for highway safety and there's no evidence, then I believe it might well be the case that not only will we lose that decision, but we will have costs awarded against us as a council, which is our taxpayers' money, of course. So did you want to comment on that, Keith or Nigel, please?
Well, I come in there if I may, Chair. Yes, without hard evidence, there would be a risk of costs if the inspector were to find against the council. But I mean, Councillor Green makes a point that yes, you can have a subjective view on whether there is a safety issue or not, but it will be for the inspector to decide how he or she thinks the wisdom of your reason for refusal. I think yes, there'll be some evidence is likely to be required. That's probably really all I can usefully say on that, I'm afraid.
Councillor Green, is it a short point? Go ahead then.
Thank you. Added to that, I think we do have valid evidence from CamCycle, and they are experts in their field. And there's quite a number of objections from the public that were listed. So we do have quite a lot of evidence related to safety. It may not be from the Highways Authority itself, but I think that is slightly muddied by the fact that this isn't a public area, and that may be why they've declined to comment. But in terms of members of the public who've objected to this application, it spans 2 pages, 178 to 179. And the first objection that can be in the summary, 7.2, safety concerns for pedestrians and cyclists using the access way due to increased numbers of road users accessing the right of way. Number 2, dangerous driving resulting from through traffic using the right of way. And we've got a people-led planning system. We should listen to what the people say.
Well, we do listen to what people say, certainly. Okay, thank you, Councillor. In that case,
Chair, could I just pip in with one more point?
Yeah,
I mean, the landowner, yes, it's a private car park, but that landowner has a duty of care to those that use it.
So, Lewis, Councillor said a few things there. Do you have anything different to show us in terms of what we might want to present in terms of a form of words?
I do. So I hope I've captured everything that members have said. So I'll just share it with you now. So the changes are in red. So I'll just read it out. The removal of the bollard encourages rat running through the site between Coldens Lane and Newmarket Road, which is a private car park for the use of customers visiting the retail units within the Cambridge Retail Park. This will introduce increased conflict between pedestrian and cycle users of the car park and motor vehicles using the route as a rat run, which will potentially compromise highway safety, endangering pedestrians and cyclists, increasing vehicular speeds within the car park, and failing to promote sustainable transport modes, cycling and walking. The proposal therefore conflicts with policies 56, 80 and 81 of the Cambridge Local Plan 2018 and paragraph 110 of the NPPF 2019.
Right, thanks for doing that, Lewis. Officers, Nigel and so on. Is there anything else we can add to that, or do you think that's about it now then?
Chair, I would take out the word highway because the point you raised earlier about it's not part of the public highway.
Which line is that in? Highway. Oh yeah.
Yes, where Lewis is pointing.
Right. Yeah, public safety perhaps. We good? So everyone agree with that? And was there anything we needed to say about this whole ideal of having a sort of hierarchy of importance where cyclists and pedestrians are top, which we have as a policy, or not our policy, but it's the Transport Authority's policy, isn't it? What do you think, Lewis?
I think I'm not sure. Does that capture it? Failing to promote sustainable transport modes, cycling, walking.
Chair, can I, sorry to cut across.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You are referring to paragraph 110 of the NPPF, which sets out in paragraph or subparagraph A, give priority first to pedestrian and cycle movements. So I'd suggest it's there by implication.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Keith. Very useful. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Lewis. So, councillors, are we happy with that form of words then? Sounds like we are. Can't hear anything to the contrary. In that case,
I would say, sorry, Chair.
Sorry,
Councillor Bajan, you want to speak?
I did put in the chat, sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
I think the fact that this roadway passes between two major routes needs to be mentioned. And secondly, that it actually cuts across between the car park and the shopping area. So everybody has to cross it. It's not like it goes round the car park. It goes through between. And I think that's an important point. It's, you know, in the first instance, when this was put in place, it was always a car park. So this was put in for a reason, however many years ago. And I don't see that reason's changed. And I think we should be really, really trying to make that point. No, it's not us that's changed. It's the owner of this site that's trying to change something.
So in that case, if councillors are in agreement, perhaps after cycling and walking in red, we could add another sentence which says that the route will connect two major roads going directly in front of the shopping area. That sound right?
Between the shopping area and the car park.
Between the shopping area and the car park. A busy pedestrian space in front of the shopping area and the car park.
Yeah.
Put that in then, Lewis, perhaps, if you can, see if we agree with that. Seeks to, I suppose.
Yeah, would this be better after the first amendment in red?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I've got a proposal. Let me just unshare my screen 1 sec.
Yeah. Nearly there, councillors. We'll have a break then.
I had a point, sorry, but I'll wait.
Go on then. Do you want to say, is
Just,
it for Listeners' attention or just for us?
Probably Lewis, just picking up
Okay,
on what Councillor
do what he's doing first, and then we'll come then.
Sorry, do you want me to wait?
Yeah, wait a minute, councillor, because
Yeah.
he's busy at the moment. He can't do more than one thing at a time. Well, he can smile and do something at a time, but. So when we do have a break, councillors, I figure we'll have maybe about half an hour. Is that okay for everyone? Yeah. Well, I think it's worth it. We want to try and get this form of words as best we can, because obviously we're up against it and we want to, well, just do the best we can for our authority and for the residents.
I'll just share my screen again. So I've just slightly changed the words around.
Yeah.
See if you agree with this.
Read it through again, Lewis, will you? That would be the best thing to do. Sure.
The removal of the bollard encourages rat running through the site, which is a private car park for the use of customers visiting the retail units within the Cambridge Retail Park. In front of the so I suppose this part's the difficult. It's the difficult part is getting in front of the retail units. I think it's probably captured by having, if we remove this part, I think this part captures the retail unit because it's putting the priority of customers first.
Okay.
So if we just do that, so the removal of the bollard encourages rat running through the site, which is a private car park for the use of customers visiting the retail units within the Cambridge Retail Park between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road, which are two busy roads. Yeah. This will introduce increased conflict between pedestrian and cycle users of the car park and motor vehicles using the route as a rat run, which will potentially compromise public safety, endangering pedestrians and cyclists, increasing vehicular speeds within the car park, and failing to promote sustainable transport modes, cycling and walking. The proposal therefore conflicts policy 56, 80 and 81 of the Cambridge Local Plan 2018 and paragraph 110 of the NPPF 2019.
Thanks,
So
Lewis.
if I could just say the point about the roadway going in front of the shops, we can bring that out in the appeal statement. This is obviously the reason of refusal the council would have decided upon, but we will also make the case within the appeal statement, so we can bring that detail out in the statement.
Yeah, and Lewis, Nigel, should it say after cyclists, comma, potentially increasing vehicular speeds, because we have no evidence, do you think, or is it okay to say increasing vehicular speeds?
Sorry, Nigel, I'm happy to answer this one. I think there is evidence that a lot of the users either using the car park or using the car park as a rat run don't abide by the 5 mph limit, and there is evidence within the transport statement of that. So yeah. I think we can safely put that in the reason for refusal and refer back to the data that has the different speeds that vehicles have used.
Yeah, you're right, aren't you? Yes. Okay, great. So are we all happy with that?
Can I just say?
First evasion, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think no fault of yours, Lewis. This is great pressure. But the first sentence is a bit clumsy. If instead of putting commas after site and between, we put brackets, that actually really separates that off. Because I think that really is an important sentence to get right.
I'm not sure that brackets are the right thing to use in this sort of statement, because we want to say things we want to say clearly without any bracketed items. That's my view. Let's hold that for a minute, Councillor Bajan. There's a couple of other people who want to speak. So Councillor Poor, you want to speak?
Yeah, to pick up on what Lewis already said, I know on page 177, the applicant's own statement confirms that the majority of cars already exceed the 5 mph speed limit. So again, I think Lewis and Nigel said they'd include that in their longer text. I just want to make sure that's in there somewhere, because I think that there is evidence that this is already a problem, and that's before it's publicised as a rat run. So obviously at the moment people don't realise. Thank you.
Councillor Thornborough?
I also wonder whether we should refer to people with disability and reduced mobility and the increased problems, because the parking spaces for parents are right next to the crossing, and previously they could park and then cross a route where only cyclists or buses would go across, but now they have to go across this new road. I didn't, and again, just following what you were saying about trying to make this as robust as possible, I didn't know whether we should refer to that.
Covered in the reason of refusals. Sorry, through you, Chair. And I think it's something we could bring out in the statement itself. But I think that point would be covered by what we're saying in the reason of refusal.
Okay, is that okay, Councillor Thornborough? So we use it, but not in the actual statement. So thanks for bringing that to our attention. So can I just say one other thing? Sorry, it's dragging on a bit, but the bit that Councillor Bajan has put in brackets. So my view on that is not to use brackets. So if it needs to go in brackets, does it need to be there at all? We know it's a car park, and we know where the site is, Cambridge Retail Park. So could it not just not be there? That encourages running through the site between Caldham's Lane and Newmarket Road. Would that do the job, Lewis?
Sorry, Chair.
I agree with Councillor Bajan. I think it's quite important to make that point, because from the discussion with members, the key thing is this is a private car park.
Okay.
And we want the rat running through the site. I think yeah, emphasise what the site is used as and the kind of priority of the users as customers, not people using it as a rat run. So my view is, yeah, keep it in brackets. Obviously, it's up to you as members.
Yeah. Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everything's just been said there, but just grammar-wise, I just don't think the brackets look right. Absolutely, I agree it should be there, but I just don't think the brackets should be there, and I just think it's the way that it reads as a sentence just doesn't grammatically read read right. So, I mean, what about if we remove the brackets and then add a comma, and then put which lies between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road, which are two busy roads? Or can we? It's just the grammar that's not sitting right with me, and I think that might be putting others off. I could be completely wrong, but
well, we could put the bracketed part at the start and say this is a private car park for the use of customers visiting retail units within Cambridge Retail Park, but the removal of the bollard encourages rat running through the sites between Coldham's Lane and Newmarket Road, which are two busy roads. That would be a way of avoiding brackets, I guess.
Through you, Chair, I agree. Normally with reasons for refusal, it's quite important to kind of state the situation. So like if it was conservation area, you'd say it's conservation area.
Yeah.
So maybe if we move this to the front,
do that then.
And say the site forms
the site, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, one more space. Yeah, that's it. Councillors, I think we're there. Are you okay with that? Yes, good, thumbs up. All right, in that case then, if you're happy with that then Lewis, Nigel, Keith, everybody, yeah. Okay, so we need to have a vote on this, don't we, form of words? Is that correct, Nigel?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Okay, so we've got the form of words. All those in favour of that form of words, Councillor Bagent.
Approved, Chair.
Councillor Green.
Approved.
Councillor Lord.
Approved.
Councillor McQueen.
approve.
Councillor Power.
Approve.
Councillor Thornborough.
Approve.
Councillor Tunnicliffe.
Not approve.
You can abstain if you want to, or not approve, whichever, but just to be clear. And okay, not approve, and I'll abstain. Okay, that's it. So, Sarah, what's the vote?
Chair, that was 6 votes in favour, 1 vote against and 1 abstention. So the new recommendation to refuse for the reasons that's on the screen at the moment have been carried.
And just for final clarity, Chair, it's obviously minded to refuse because we don't have the authority to make the decision. So we'll send this, make this part of our statement for the appeal.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And I'm feeling a bit tired now, but are we done with that now? Is there anything more to do, or have we finished?
That's it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks for confirming. Okay, thank you, councillors, for that. I know it's a very long debate. Thank you for sticking with it. And now let's have a break. So it's nearly 10 past, so should we come back at 22:02 then, please? Just over half an hour break. Thank you very much again. See you then. Thanks.